There's a new me coming out, and I just have to live, and I wanna give. I'm completely positive. I think this time around I am gonna do it like you never knew it. Oh, I'll make it through. The time has come for me to break out of the shell. I have to shout that I am coming out. I'm coming out. I want the world to know.
Welcome to the show Never Too Late Ever, where we focus on making the next chapter of your life the very best chapter ever. I am your host, Lorraine Hoving, and I am so glad you are joining us today. This day will change your life. Open your heart, open your ears, and listen, and you will find a gem, a treasure that you can apply to your life today. That is our goal today. And today I'm so excited to introduce you to Karen Worstell. Welcome, Karen. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's just a pleasure to be here with you today.
And Karen has a little puppy. Well, when I say little puppy, he's a 30-pound puppy at her feet. So if you hear any stirring, it's just the dog. And I love dogs. I wish I was with you. Anyways, let me tell you a little bit about Karen. She is a well-known as a serial chief information security officer. I didn't even know there was something called that, but now I know, for an iconic companies across industry sectors, and as a Silicon Valley technology leader. So my hat's off to you, because I am not necessarily tech savvy. So that sounds wonderful. Now, whereabouts are you located exactly?
I live with my family in the south part of Denver, Colorado, in a town called Lone Tree.
Wow. Okay. All right. So let's get started. Today, you entitled our talk today, Making Major Life Pivots to Live the Life You Were Made For. I love it. Karen has a life principle, and this just really piqued my interest, to have deep roots, but listen to this, in a movable pot. She wants to be fully in her presence, but never so bound to it that she can't answer a call to live life's sacred contract. It wasn't always this way for Karen, and her life's experience taught her that whispers of the heart need to be listened to. Even though the noise of the world and our own head tries to drown out those divine whispers. These moments of pivot can be exhilarating. Karen wants to talk today to us about how to avoid paralysis that keeps us rooted in place when your heart tells you to move. Now, I just love that explanation. So tell us a little bit how you got there and what you think a life pivot is, and maybe explain from your experience.
Sure. Well, my story, in brief, I went to college as an undergraduate and got my degrees and immediately became a mom. And, you know, choices that I had made at a fairly young stage in life, I think I was sort of riding the wave, but not really with a very particular direction in mind. And I found myself in a pretty tough situation, as many people do, purely the result of my own choices at that age. But I realized, I think I had a major kind of whisper of the heart moment when I was at the local grocery store trying to shop for groceries for my family, and literally could not afford to buy apples. Then were like 39 cents a pound. Right. And I had to go to the produce manager and ask him if he had apples that he had pulled from the shelf, because I couldn't afford to buy apples at 39 cents a pound.
How many children did you have at that time?
I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Okay.
And pretty broke.
Yeah.
So I think there was a moment there when I just knew that something had to change, but I didn't know what it was. And I had a hacker brother, in the literal sense of the word. He was one of those tinkerers and very early computer guy. Anyway, he showed up over at my house with his computer. He brought me at that time, which was a TRS-80. It's a Radio Shack computer. It had a serial number of 6. It was, I still have it. It's pretty antique.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and said, "Sister, you need to learn to code." And it was really, truly the furthest thing from my mind. But he was a huge ally for me, and he helped me through this. And one of the things that I realized was, as he coached me and I learned different programming, I self-taught different programming languages. I found out I was really good at it.
Yeah.
The pivot came, that was kind of like a hobby until a pivot came when the local university opened up a graduate program in computer science. And it was right at that time where I was like realizing that this was something that I really liked. It was something I was good at. And I thought, I think computers might be really important in the future.
Right. Now, what year would have this been, Karen?
1984.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And I ended up applying. I never thought, I just knew I had that whisper in my head. Here's how that whisper and the noise thing worked for me, because I had that whisper in my heart that said, wow, this could be a game changer.
Right.
Like literally you could do something here that would make a big difference.
Yeah.
And then the noise in my head, like the critic in my head is like, I thought you wanted to be a good mother. Like, what's the deal with, what you wanting to do this? And you don't have any money. You're just flat broke. How are you going to pay for school? It was like all those kinds of objections
right.
started flooding my head. And
how did you overcome those?
Once I get an idea in my head, it's both a real attribute and a fault sometimes. But my husband calls it stubborn. I call it determined.
Yeah. We'll call it determination.
Yeah. And I just had it in my head that this is something I was going to undertake. I was going to see, right? I mean, the step, I could take one step, and it was to apply. And if it was not meant to be, I wouldn't get in,
Right.
And I applied and I got in. It just about floored me. Right. And as I had no idea how I was going to pay for it, how any of that was going to happen, as it turned out, I became eligible for lots of grants, for scholarships. I made it all the way through. In 2 years, I got my master's degree, and it was 20 years later, I left my job as the Chief Information Security Officer at Microsoft.
Wow. Oh, amazing. Karen, that's an amazing story, because you had to overcome that inner critic in our head that keeps saying, well, what are you going to do?
Oh, man.
Yeah. And then the guilt, the mommy guilt, and all of that. And the reason I love this story too, because I believe I heard it at Pete Vargas's, now it sounds so familiar to me, at his conference. Yeah. I love the story because of your brother. I just thought he was so instrumental in your life that he saw something more for you. He had vision for you, and he kind of must have understood your talents as well.
Yeah, I think he had belief in me when I'd forgotten it.
Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's always been a huge ally of mine. I'm very fortunate to have siblings that I'm close to, and he's 7 years older than I am.
Oh,
so
is he?
He was, so he had some time under his belt, to really be working with this.
Right.
And he saw some real promise there, and he also saw my situation.
Right.
And without any judgment, he just stepped in, and it's like, you know what? this is what you need to do.
What?
It was
No,
like
but
getting a
that's
lifeline.
yeah, that's an amazing big brother. Yes, I bet you've
Yeah.
thanked them all. So then you worked with Microsoft for 20 years. Wow. I mean, I just admire you so because, like I said, I'm not tech savvy. So I believe it's a gift. You have a gift. And so you hung on with Microsoft for 20 years. And did you live over in the Silicon Valley at that time?
Well, actually, I wasn't at Microsoft for 20 years. I had several jobs that led up to Microsoft. I started at the Boeing company. I went from there to Stanford Research Institute. I was a researcher.
Oh.
And I was a researcher in the early days of computer networking and setting and defining what security should look like. So I was in that at the very early stages. And I did several jobs and they led to Microsoft. So I was at Bank of America, at AT&T Wireless and Boeing and a number of places on the way. And then I was recruited by Microsoft to take on their cybersecurity job there.
Yeah, it's an amazing story because you've seen computers from 1984. You understand it probably like not many people do. And so that's an amazing story. Now you said be deeply rooted in a movable pot. So what does it mean? I like the deep rooted. And then what does that movable pot mean?
Well, the idea for me, I think part of that, where that really came to play in my life, was another pivot. Because what my career had really afforded me was the opportunity to make sure my kids got through school, to do lots to help my family, and I was able to live in what I thought then was what was my dream home. Like it was a family home. I lived on the water on Puget Sound. I'm from
up this area of Bellingham, and then now we're on Vancouver Island, but Bellingham. So you were down in the Puget Sound. Yes.
Yeah. And I think, being deeply rooted is like, be fully present, not being worrying about the future. Like what's next for me? What's next for me? What's next for me? It's like, I am where I am at. And I absolutely loved that. And then I realized that the time had come. It was another pivot, another nudge, was to move on. And we were going to make a move to Denver.
So you moved to Denver, and how long ago was that, Karen?
About 3 years.
3 years ago?
The thing. Yeah. So I was at that point where it was time to make the move. That was a very tough move for me because of what I was leaving. I had every intention of being there until my children had to carry me out feet first. It was everything I wanted, right? But there was something I knew that needed to shift, and we had precipitating events that just kind of brought that up. And so it was one of those moments where I literally had to say, it's time to move, right? I was so deeply rooted there, but then it became time to say, yeah, if I'm going to stay at this point in my life and just say I'm never going to change, then I'm setting a precedent I didn't want to set. And we went ahead, I passed my 6th decade not too long ago. So, it was kind of a late in life shift. And I just really basically said, it is time to make that change happen. And
was your hubby feeling the same thing, or?
Yeah. In fact, he was part of the help that helped propel me along, because once he decided that change was going to happen, he was all for it, right?
Right.
I vacillated a little bit back and forth, but I think the thing that really pushed me there was, I had to ask myself, Karen, are you going to never make another big change in your life? I mean, you could live to your 100, right?
Right.
Is this it? Is this it now? Or are you? It's, and it was kind of like never too late. It's like, make the shift. There's a reason why it has to happen. And I didn't really know why, but I found out after we got to Denver. So
I know, and it's so exciting because it's like an adventure. And so often we get stuck kind of in the same old, and when we